friends. I have a book today called Fanny in the Kitchen. It's by Deborah Hopkinson. And I picked out this book in part because lots of people are baking and cooking these days. And this is a true story about somebody who is very important to baking and cooking. And her name is Fanny Farmer. The subtitle of this book is The Whole Story from Soup to Nuts of How Fanny Farmer Invented Recipes with Precise Measurements. I didn't even know somebody had to invent that, but they did. First course, the soup. We meet Marcia. There's Marcia. Marcia Shaw could do many things extremely well. She could make long, perfect candles. This was a while ago when you had to make your own candles. Scrub clothes on the washboard until they were spotless, and polish the oil lamps until they shined. Mama is lucky to have a helper like me, Marcia decided. But one day, Mama announced, a girl named Fanny Farmer is coming here to live. She'll be my mother's helper. What about me? Asked Marcia. I'm your helper. Yes, dear, said Mama, but with baby coming, I need someone to cook. Marcia scowled at Mama's big, fancy stove. She didn't want a new baby or a girl named Fanny. She could only hope that Fanny Farmer didn't know how to cook. Second course, a small success. But from the very first morning Fanny arrived, it was clear she did know how to cook. What delicious eggs, Mama said at breakfast. Papa chewed happily. Ah, and these biscuits so light and flaky. Marcia folded her arms. I won't eat, she decided. Then they'll be sorry they brought her here. Papa reached over and plucked a biscuit off her plate. Marcia, would you please ask Fanny if there are any more? As Marcia pushed open the kitchen door, toasty warm smells tickled her nose. Papa wants more biscuits, she said rudely. Coming up, Fanny replied pleasantly. Fanny plunked a wooden spoon into Marcia's hand. You can help. Just spoon the dough onto the pan while I check the fire. Make them nice and small, Fanny added. Small biscuits are more dainty, don't you think? Marcia stood still. Why should she help? Still, it did look rather fun. Later, when Marcia brought out her basket of steaming biscuits, she couldn't resist saying, I made them. After breakfast, Marcia snuck a biscuit and popped it into her mouth. It was small, light, and flaky. Just delicious. Third course, the griddle cake mistake. Fanny was making griddle cakes, golden brown and steaming hot, as Marcia watched. The biggest mistake with griddle cakes, said Fanny, waving her turner, is to flip them at the wrong time. When is the right time? Asked Marcia. Look at this one, Fanny instructed. Is it puffed? Marcia looked closely. It's puffed. Is it full of bubbles? Marcia nodded. Little bubbles were popping up all over. The now is precisely the right time. With one sweep, Fanny flipped the cake in the air and neatly back onto the griddle. Let me try. Marcia grabbed the turner. I don't need help. I was watching. Fanny raised an eyebrow. Fine, I'll have a cup of tea. Marcia clutched the turner. She checked to see if Fanny was looking. But Fanny was curled up with a newspaper, cozy with a cat at her feet. Marcia flipped the first cake too early. It came out mushy in the middle. She flipped the second cake too late. It was already completely black around the edges. Then Marcia flipped the third griddle cake just when it was puffed and full of bubbles. She flipped it right onto the cat. Well, you did flip it at the right time, Fanny said. Precisely at the right time. Fourth course, the egg disaster. When baby was born, Marcia wanted to bake a special cake for Mama all by herself. After all, how hard could it be? Marcia put on Fanny's best apron. She measured flour, then beat the butter and sugar until they were light and fluffy. I'm baking a cake. I can do this extremely well, she said to herself. But when Marcia cracked the first egg into the bowl, pieces of shell fell into the batter. Even more shell dropped in when she cracked the second egg. And on the third, the most awful, the most horrid, the most odious smell filled the kitchen. Fanny walked in and grabbed her nose. Ooh, a rotten egg! Marcia looked at her ruined cake. Tears filled her eyes. But Fanny just waved a hand in the air. Everyone finds rotten eggs sometimes. Next time, try this. She held up an egg. First, hold it in front of a candle flame in a dark room. The center should look clear. Second, place it in a basin of cold water. It should sink. Third, place the large end to your cheek. A warmth should be felt. And so Marcia learned the 3 ways to determine the freshness of eggs. Thank you, Fanny, she said. Now could you please help me bake a cake? Fourth course. An excellent idea. After baby came, all Mama wanted to do was play with him. Marcia found this disgusting, so she began to spend more time with Fanny in the kitchen. Marcia liked the kitchen. Mysterious spices scented the air, and copper pans gleamed above her head like autumn moons. And Marcia decided that, after all, she liked Fanny. Fanny seemed like a magician who could make mashed potatoes fluffier than clouds and blueberry pies sweeter than a summer sky. Cookery is magic, declared Marcia one day, crunching a hot ginger snap. Fanny shook her head. Preparing food well isn't magic. It's an art and a science that anyone can learn. Anyone but me, Marcia grumbled. There's too much to remember. At least you have it all in your head. I do have a lot in my head, Fanny said thoughtfully. But Marcia, what if I wrote out precise instructions for you? Then you could cook exactly as I do. Will you explain everything? Asked Marcia excitedly. How to mix a fancy cake, make a pot of soup, even measure a cup of flour? Everything, Fanny promised. Fanny got a huge notebook and began right away. She explained how to measure a spoonful of salt so that it's exactly level, and how to choose the ripest melons in the market. She even wrote directions for the 3 ways to determine the freshness of eggs. Word of Fanny's notebook began to spread. Marcia's mother consulted it to make the special sauce Papa loved so much. Neighbors dropped in to borrow the recipe or that to ask Fanny's advice. Best of all, the notebook made cooking much easier for Mama. Fanny, if I can learn to cook using your book, anyone can, Marcia said. Why, I believe you could teach the whole town of Boston to cook. What an excellent idea, said Fanny. Maybe I'll try. 6th course, Marcia Shaw, Master Chef. And so Fanny decided to become a cooking teacher at the Boston Cooking School. Marcia was sad to see her go, but she was sure Fanny would be the best teacher there. Before Fanny left, Marcia wanted to bake her a special cake. She knew just what to do. In Fanny's cookery notebook, Marcia found the recipe for golden cake. She read it carefully, she measured, mixed, and combined. Then she put the cake in the oven and baked it just until it was done. You made this by yourself? Asked Mama in surprise. So tasty, said Papa with his mouth full. Even Baby got a big bite. Fanny took a bite and chewed slowly. Marcia held her breath. Marcia Shaw, you can do many things extremely well, Fanny announced at last. You can bake small, dainty biscuits, always spot a rotten egg, and flip griddle cakes at precisely the right time. Fanny paused. And you also bake an excellent cake. Marcia laughed and picked up her fork. She took a bite of cake. Just delicious. So Fanny Farmer then went to cooking school, and she wrote the Boston Cooking School cookbook that later was the Fanny Farmer cookbook, and she explained all things about cooking, which a lot of it is science, and about measuring and writing out recipes. And at the very back of this book is Fanny Farmer's famous griddle cake recipe, which are mostly like pancakes. So here it is if you would like to make them yourself. I hope that you have a good day, and I hope that you eat something delicious.